The cemetery grass felt cold through my stockings, the damp soil clinging to my knees as I knelt there, my body a foreign weight against the freshly turned earth. Nobody came to help me stand. The funeral director and his silent, efficient staff had departed 30 minutes prior, their black hearse a final, somber procession. The caterers, with their forced smiles and lukewarm coffee, had melted away 20 minutes before that, leaving behind only the ghosts of their transient service. Even the pastor, his voice a balm I hadn't truly felt, was gone now, his black sedan a fading memory around the bend of the cemetery road. I was alone, truly alone, at Frederick's grave. 53 years of marriage, a tapestry woven with joy and struggle, with quiet understanding and shared dreams, and here I was, unraveling at the edges, standing utterly solitary. My name is Miriam Caldwell. I am 71 years old, and 3 days ago, the world shifted on its axis. Frederick collapsed in our kitchen, a sudden, brutal end, while I was upstairs innocently folding his shirts. The EMTs had spoken of a massive heart attack, instantaneous, nothing anyone could have done. A clinical pronouncement that felt like a dismissive wave, a denial of the vast chasm his absence had torn in my life. But that, I was beginning to learn, was not the worst part of the story. The true horror, the one that grips you with a cold, unforgiving hand, is learning who shows up when you need them most and who doesn't, who sees your grief and who sees only opportunity. The wind picked up, a sudden gust scattering dead leaves across Frederick's temporary marker, each rustle a whisper of the finality I was meant to accept. I pulled my black coat tighter, the fabric a thin shield against a world suddenly bereft of warmth. My arthritic knees, stubborn and protesting, screamed as I tried to stand. That's when I heard them. 2 car doors slamming, one right after the other, sharp and jarring like gunshots in the sacred, quiet afternoon. I turned, my gaze heavy, slow. My son Trevor stood beside his silver Mercedes, already straightening his tie, a gesture of propriety that felt entirely false. His wife Sienna emerged from the passenger side, her black Prada bag, I knew, costing more than most people's monthly mortgage payment. They had been here for the service, of course, arriving late, slipping into the second row, far from me, a deliberate distance that spoke volumes even then. I had assumed they'd left with everyone else, a polite fiction I clung to. I was wrong. They walked toward me with purpose, not the slow, respectful shuffle of mourners, but the quick, determined stride of people on a mission, their faces already composed into expressions of thinly veiled impatience. "Mom," Trevor's voice, a familiar edge to it, the one he always used when he wanted something, cut through the quiet air. "We need to talk." I pressed my palm against Frederick's temporary marker, a small metal plate in the cold earth. The metal felt cold, unyielding, a stark echo of the finality it represented. "Your father just—" My voice cracked, a fragile thing. "Can't this wait?" "No." Sienna stopped precisely 3 feet away, a carefully measured distance, far enough that she wouldn't have to risk human contact, close enough that I could see her perfectly applied makeup, utterly unsmudged, a testament to her calculated composure. "It really can't." Trevor, standing over his father's fresh grave, pulled out his phone, the screen a glowing obscenity in the fading light. He began scrolling, his thumb moving with a detached efficiency that chilled me. "Dad's lawyer keeps dodging calls," he announced, his voice devoid of emotion, as if discussing a logistical problem. "Sienna's father has been trying to reach him all week. We need access to the accounts by Friday." Friday, 4 days away. The dirt on Frederick's grave hadn't even truly settled, hadn't yet begun its slow return to the earth. The sheer audacity of it, the immediate, ravenous hunger, took my breath away. "There are investment opportunities," Sienna added, her tone light, detached, like she was discussing the weather or a new season's fashion line. "Time-sensitive ones. With $50 million in assets, we could triple that within 6 months. But we need to move now." $50 million. They had calculated it down to the penny, I knew. Probably had been calculating for years, watching Frederick's business grow, watching his investments multiply, watching and waiting for this exact, brutal moment. My legs felt weak, a sudden tremor passing through me. "The will reading is next week," I managed, my voice a faint whisper. "That's too long." Trevor stepped closer, placed his hand on my shoulder. His fingers felt cold, even through my thick coat, a chill that seeped into my bones. "Mom, I know you're grieving, but Dad would want us to be smart about this. He'd want his money to grow, to benefit the whole family." He squeezed my shoulder, his voice dropping to that patronizing, saccharine tone that always made my stomach churn. "You don't understand these things as we do. Financial planning, investment strategies. Let us handle all that. You just focus on healing." Let them handle it. As if I were senile, as if 53 years of marriage to a successful, shrewd businessman had taught me nothing. As if I hadn't been there for every decision, every risk, every triumph. I stepped back, out of Trevor's reach, a sudden, deliberate movement. Something cold and hard settled in my chest, a shard of ice replacing the dull ache of grief. It felt almost like clarity, sharp and unwelcome. "The will reading is Tuesday," I said quietly, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil within. 10 a.m. at Frederick's lawyer's office. You'll learn everything then. Sienna's face hardened instantly, the false sympathy vanishing like smoke in a gust of wind. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, her voice tight with thinly veiled anger. "You're being deliberately difficult." "I'm following my husband's wishes," I stated simply, truthfully. "Your husband is dead." The words came out sharp, cruel, a raw wound. Then Sienna caught herself, softening her voice into something that might have passed for gentle if you didn't look into her eyes, which remained cold and calculating. "I'm sorry, that came out wrong. I just mean you need to think about your future, about Delilah and Mason, about family." Family. The words stuck in my throat like broken glass, splintered and meaningless coming from her lips. Trevor's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, typed a quick response, then looked back at me, his eyes now narrowed. "We're trying to help you, Mom. Don't make this harder than it needs to be." They left without saying goodbye, their departure as abrupt and unfeeling as their arrival. Sienna's heels clicked against the cemetery path, a staccato rhythm of impatience. Trevor's Mercedes roared to life, tires squealing slightly as he accelerated out of the parking lot, a final, aggressive punctuation mark. I stood there, watching their taillights disappear into the twilight, my hand still pressed against Frederick's cold grave marker. And that cold, hard feeling in my chest, that nascent clarity, grew stronger, because suddenly I remembered something, a letter. An envelope Frederick's lawyer, Mr. Castellanos, had given me yesterday, pressed into my hands with gentle insistence. "From Frederick," Mr. Castellanos had said, his voice soft. "He wanted you to have this after the funeral. Open it when you're ready." I tucked it into my purse without a glance, too numb to process anything beyond putting one foot in front of the other, simply surviving the crushing weight of grief. But now, standing in the empty cemetery, with the bitter echo of my son's greed still hanging in the air, I reached into my purse and pulled out the envelope. It was sealed with red wax, Frederick's distinctive initials pressed into it, a personal cipher. Across the front, in his familiar, elegant handwriting, were the words, "For Miriam. Open when you're ready." My hand started to shake, a tremor that began deep inside and spread outwards. I drove home in a fog, the envelope sitting on the passenger seat like a living thing, a silent confidant. Our house sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac, the same house we'd moved into 30 years ago, when Frederick's business had finally taken off, when his strategic vision began truly yielding fruit. He had carried me over the threshold then, even though we'd been married 23 years by that point, laughing at his own sentimentality. New house, new beginning, he'd declared, his eyes bright with hope. Now it was just a house, empty, hollow. His coffee mug still sat in the sink from 3 days ago, a fossil of routine. I'd been too scared to touch it, as if washing it away would erase him. His reading glasses rested on the side table next to his worn leather chair, his slippers by the bed, positioned exactly as he'd left them, waiting for feet that would never fill them again. Every object is a silent accusation, a testament to what was lost. I made chamomile tea with trembling hands, the steam a fragile warmth in the cool kitchen, and sat in Frederick's chair. The leather still held the impression of his body, a faint memory. I could almost feel him there, watching me, waiting, his quiet strength a palpable presence. The envelope felt heavy, substantial, heavier than paper should feel, weighted with unspoken words, with a truth I was both desperate and terrified to uncover. I broke the wax seal, the soft crack echoing in the silent room, and pulled out 3 pages covered in Frederick's careful, distinctive handwriting. My vision blurred immediately, tears welling, but I blinked them back fiercely, determined to see clearly. I took a deep breath and started reading. My dearest Miriam, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer. I'm sorry for every morning I won't wake up beside you, every sunset we won't watch together from the porch. I'm sorry I won't be there to hold your hand through whatever comes next. The words were his voice, clear and strong in my mind, a phantom caress. But I'm not sorry for what I've done with our estate. You know it as well as I do. Trevor stopped being our son years ago. He became something else, someone else. We tried to raise him, didn't we? We sacrificed everything to give him opportunities we never had, opportunities for true growth, for contributing to something larger than himself. But somewhere along the way, money and status became more important to him than love, than loyalty, than basic human decency. He exchanged the immutable currency of familial bond for the ephemeral shimmer of wealth. I've watched him treat you like an inconvenience, a relic to be managed. I've watched him measure our worth, the value of our entire lives, in dollars instead of years, in percentages instead of shared memories. I've watched him circle like a vulture, a predictable predator, waiting for exactly this moment, the moment of my vulnerability, for him to swoop in and claim what he believes is his by right. Do you remember what he said to me when I refused to invest in Sienna's father's dubious scheme? A scheme that, I might add, reeked of the kind of short-sighted avarice that collapses entire markets, that betrays entire communities. He told me I was a selfish old man, holding on to money that belonged to the family. Belonged to the family, as if 50 years of work, of sacrifice, of building something from nothing, belonged to him by right of birth alone. That was when I knew, when I really knew, when the last shred of hope, that stubborn, foolish maternal hope, finally died. So I made arrangements, changes, plans that I kept from you because I needed you to be genuinely surprised when the time came. I needed your reactions to be real, Miriam. I needed Trevor and Sienna to see your face and know you had no part in what I'd done. This was my strategy, my final testament, my quiet war. What have I done? You'll find out Tuesday at the will reading. And my love, when you do, I need you to remember something important. The best revenge isn't hatred. It's not anger or violence or dramatic confrontation. The best revenge is giving people exactly what they deserve, what they've truly earned through their actions, and watching them destroy themselves trying to fight it. It's a quiet, devastating justice, a strategic withdrawal of the ground beneath their feet. Trevor wants our money. He'll get exactly what his love is worth, exactly what his years of neglect and cruelty and calculated indifference have earned him, which, as you will see, is precious little. Everything I did was for you. Every hour I worked, every risk I took, every decision I made, all of it was to make sure you'd be taken care of, to make sure that when I was gone, you'd have security, comfort, and peace. a sanctuary from the storm he would inevitably bring. Trust me, my love. Trust the plan. And when Tuesday comes, when that will is read, and Trevor's true face shows itself completely, remember, you owe him nothing. Not your money, not your grief, not one more ounce of the love you've wasted on someone who stopped deserving it years ago. Your emotional capital is too precious to squander on a barren field. I love you. I've always loved you. From that church social in 1972 until my last breath, you were the only thing that mattered. You were my anchor, my confidant, my partner in every sense of the word. You were the only true treasure I ever sought, and I found it in you. Forever yours, Frederick. P.S. Don't let him intimidate you. Don't let him make you doubt. Stand firm. Mr. Castellanos has everything prepared exactly as I instructed, a blueprint for justice. All you have to do is show up and let the truth unfold. A quiet revolution. The letter slipped from my fingers and fell to my lap, a feather-light weight carrying the gravity of a world. I sat there in Frederick's chair, in our empty house, and felt something break open in my chest. Not grief this time, something different, something that felt almost like hope, fragile yet persistent, like a shoot breaking through frozen ground. Frederick had known. Of course he'd known. He'd seen what I'd refused to see, acknowledged what I'd spent years denying, justifying, protecting, and he'd done something about it. He had, with the meticulous planning of a general anticipating an enemy's move, prepared for this betrayal. His foresight, his strategic acumen, usually reserved for the cutthroat world of business, had been turned inwards to protect his most precious asset, me. I picked up the letter and read it again, then a third time, each word sinking deeper, reshaping my understanding of the past 6 months, even the past years. All those discreet meetings with Mr. Castellanos, the private phone calls, the hours Frederick spent in his study, door closed, papers spread across his desk like maps of a secret campaign. He'd been planning this, building something, a defensive structure, preparing for a moment he knew would come, a moment of familial reckoning. It was a strategy born not of malice, but of profound love and a clear-eyed assessment of human nature. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, a beautiful, indifferent display. Soon it would be dark. Tomorrow would be Monday, and the day after that would be Tuesday, the day of the reckoning. I folded Frederick's letter carefully, pressed it against my chest, feeling the warmth of the paper against my skin, and whispered to the empty room, "I trust you." But trusting Frederick, even in his magnificent strategic foresight, and enduring Trevor, were two entirely different things. Frederick's plan was a masterpiece of emotional engineering, but I was still the one who had to stand in the breach. The thought of facing Trevor again, of witnessing his naked greed and manufactured outrage, was a bitter pill. But the clarity, the quiet, chilling understanding Frederick's letter had gifted me, also brought a strange new strength. Monday morning started with text messages, a barrage of them before I'd even gotten out of bed. 3 distinct pings. Trevor. "Mom, we need to talk about this situation." Trevor again. "Sienna's father says there are legal ways to expedite the process." Trevor finally demanded, "Call me ASAP." I deleted them without responding, their urgent tone a mere buzzing irritation. I made myself breakfast, oatmeal with blueberries, exactly the way Frederick liked it, a small ritual of defiance. I ate at the kitchen table, in the same spot where I'd found him 3 days ago, slumped over, the sudden silence of his departure still an ache in the air. But now I felt nothing but that strange, cold clarity, a surgical precision in my emotional landscape. My phone rang. Trevor. I let it go to voicemail, listening to his carefully modulated tone, his feigned concern, already knowing the emptiness behind it. It rang again. Sienna this time. Voicemail. By noon, the tally stood at 6 missed calls and 12 text messages. Their tone shifted, predictably, from insistent to annoyed, then to borderline threatening. Sienna, her messages always more subtly manipulative, wrote, "Miriam, we're just trying to help you understand the financial complexities." Trevor, more blunt, accused, "Mom, you're not thinking clearly." Sienna again, "We have a responsibility to protect the family assets." Trevor, finally, attempting a familiar hook, "Dad would want us to work together on this." That last one almost made me laugh, a short, bitter sound. Frederick wanted a lot of things. Working with Trevor, collaborating on anything that involved integrity or long-term vision was certainly not one of them. He had wanted peace for me, security. He had wanted to expose the truth. His strategy was clear, unambiguous. My son's self-serving pleas were simply background noise to the symphony of Frederick's final, profound act of love. At 2 p.m., someone knocked on my door, hard, aggressive, rattling the frame. I looked through the peephole and saw Trevor's face, flushed with anger, his jaw tight. I didn't open it. "Mom!" he pounded again, louder, more insistent. "I know you're in there. Open up. We need to talk about this." I stepped back from the door, a quiet retreat, and walked to the kitchen, letting him knock, letting him yell, letting him show his true, ugly self to the neighbors who were probably watching from behind their curtains, their eyes a silent jury. He gave up after 10 minutes, his frustration palpable even through the solid oak. I heard his car start, heard the angry rev of the engine as he sped away, a childish tantrum. My phone buzzed with another text. "You're making a huge mistake." I turned my phone off, severing the last connection, and spent the rest of the day in Frederick's study, surrounded by his books, his quiet wisdom. I pulled out old photo albums, flipping through the pages of a life that felt both intimately familiar and impossibly distant. Pictures of Trevor as a baby, a cherubic, innocent face. As a toddler, all clumsy charm and curious eyes. As a young boy, with grass stains on his knees and gap-toothed smiles, a pure, unadulterated joy. Pictures of us as a family, camping trips under starry skies, chaotic birthday parties, the quiet magic of Christmas mornings. When had it changed? When had that sweet, curious boy turned into the man who stood over his father's fresh grave, demanding money, his heart calcified by greed? I couldn't pinpoint a single moment, a definitive fracture. It had been gradual, a slow erosion of empathy, of kindness, of basic human decency, like watching a magnificent cliff face crumble into the ocean, one piece at a time, until nothing remained but empty air where solid ground used to be. A slow, insidious corruption, a silent metastasis of the soul, turning gold into dross. The phone rang again, a distant, insistent buzz, even through the turned-off setting. Trevor, then Sienna, then a number I didn't recognize. Probably Sienna's father, a financier whose reputation for ruthless deals preceded him like a dark cloud. I left the phone off, embracing the silence, the quiet defiance of a woman finally seeing clearly. I went to bed early, Frederick's letter tucked under my pillow like a talisman, its words a shield against the encroaching night, a promise of a new dawn. Tuesday morning arrived, cold and gray, but I felt a strange sense of anticipation, a quiet resolve. I woke at dawn, showered, and dressed carefully. Black slacks, a burgundy blouse Frederick had always loved, pearl earrings he'd given me for our 50th anniversary, their luster undimmed by time. I looked at myself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. She looked harder than before. Older, yes, and tired, but she also looked ready. Ready for battle. Ready for truth. Ready to step into the role Frederick had so carefully prepared for her. Mr. Castellanos' office sat in a converted Victorian house downtown, all dark wood and stained glass windows, a sanctuary of legal precision. I arrived 15 minutes early, the waiting room empty, hushed. My purse was clutched in my lap, its contents a secret weapon, my heart beating steady and slow, a drum of quiet anticipation. At exactly 9:57, Trevor and Sienna swept through the door, their entrance a calculated performance. Sienna wore a cream-colored suit that probably cost more than my car payment, her posture rigid, her expression a careful blend of sorrow and expectation. Trevor had on a navy blue suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expression somewhere between confident and smug, already savoring the spoils. They saw me, sitting there quietly, and their faces rearranged themselves into something approximating sympathy, a fleeting mask. "Mom," Trevor sat down next to me, too close, his presence a stifling weight. "Glad you made it. We were worried about you driving alone." No, they weren't. They were worried I wouldn't show up, worried they'd have to wait even longer to get their hands on what they thought was theirs. Their concern was a thinly veiled insult, a calculated jab at my perceived fragility. Sienna sat on my other side, sandwiching me between them, a strategic encirclement. "Miriam, before we go in, we just want you to know we're here to support you through this difficult process. Whatever decisions need to be made, we'll make them together as a family." Family. That word again. Weaponized, hollowed out of all meaning, stripped bare of its emotional resonance. It was a tactical maneuver, an attempt to regain control through a hollow appeal. At exactly 10 o'clock, Mr. Castellanos' assistant, a young woman with a kind but serious demeanor, appeared. "He's ready for you." We filed into his office, a spacious room with high ceilings and heavy mahogany furniture. Mr. Castellanos stood behind his large desk, a tall man in his 60s, with silver hair and kind, perceptive eyes that had seen everything, understood everything, eyes that held a quiet wisdom. He'd been Frederick's lawyer for 30 years, a witness to our lives. He'd been at our wedding anniversary party 2 years ago, raising a glass to our enduring love. He'd held my hand at the funeral, a firm, comforting grip, and pressed Frederick's letter into my palm, a silent conspiracy. He knew exactly what was about to happen. "Please sit," he gestured to the 3 chairs arranged in front of his desk, each one an individual island. Trevor and Sienna immediately took the 2 chairs directly facing the desk, a united front. I sat in the 3rd chair, slightly to the side. Already, unconsciously, we had arranged ourselves into opposing sides, a silent declaration of the battle to come. Mr. Castellanos opened a leather folder and pulled out a thick document, Frederick's will. At the bottom of the last page, I could clearly see my husband's signature, strong and sure, even in his final months, a testament to his unwavering resolve. "First," Mr. Castellanos said, his voice formal and measured, "let me express my deepest condolences. Frederick was a good man, a dear friend. I'll miss him greatly." Sienna shifted impatiently in her chair, her gaze fixed on the document, her forced sympathy already cracking. Trevor nodded quickly, his eyes equally fixed, his impatience barely concealed. The niceties were merely obstacles to their objective. Now, before we begin the official reading, I need to explain something. Mr. Castellanos looked at each of us in turn, his gaze lingering briefly on Trevor and Sienna, a silent, knowing assessment. Frederick made several significant amendments to his will in the months before his death. The final version was completed and signed exactly 3 weeks ago. It supersedes all previous documents. Trevor leaned forward, his carefully constructed composure momentarily faltering. "What kind of amendments?" he asked, his voice sharp with suspicion. Mr. Castellanos offered him a polite, unyielding smile. "You'll understand shortly." Now, the will begins with standard provisions regarding funeral arrangements, which have been completed, and organ donation preferences. He paused, turning a page. Moving to the distribution of assets. "The house," Sienna interrupted, her voice betraying her desperation, cutting through his calm delivery. "We'd like to discuss the house first. It's a valuable property, and there are certain tax implications." "Mrs. Parker," Mr. Castellanos' voice cut through hers like a surgical knife, calm but absolute. "Please allow me to read the document as written. There will be time for questions afterward." She pressed her lips together, her face tight with suppressed frustration, and sat back, but her hand instinctively found her phone in her lap. I saw her fingers moving, probably calculating figures, running scenarios, before he'd even told us what those figures were. The financial calculus was their only language. "To my beloved wife Miriam," Mr. Castellanos read, his voice clear and resonant, "I leave the following: our family home and all its contents, the entirety of my investment portfolio, currently valued at $48,300,000, my pension, life insurance policies, and all remaining business interests. Additionally, all vehicles, personal effects, and any assets not specifically designated elsewhere in this document." The room went silent. Absolutely silent. The air grew thick, heavy with unspoken shock. I could hear Sienna's breath catch, a small, strangled sound. I heard Trevor's sharp intake of air, a gasp of disbelief. They had expected so much, assumed so much, and now the foundation of their avarice was crumbling. "What about Trevor?" Sienna's voice came out strangled, a thin thread of sound. Mr. Castellanos continued reading, his voice unwavering, as if she hadn't spoken, as if her desperate interjection was merely an unheard whisper in a vast, silent hall. "To my grandchildren, Delilah Ann Parker and Mason Frederick Parker, I establish an educational trust valued at $2 million. His words were a cool, precise delivery of a carefully constructed plan. "This trust shall be managed by an independent trustee and used solely for educational expenses, tuition, books, housing, and related costs. The trust shall be distributed directly to accredited institutions on behalf of the beneficiaries, and no funds shall be accessible by their parents or guardians for any reason whatsoever." Trevor's face, which had been pale with shock, was now turning a furious, mottled red. "That's it? That's all he left them?" he spluttered, disbelief warring with rage. "I'm not finished," Mr. Castellanos stated calmly, turning a page, his hand steady. His gaze met mine for a brief moment, a fleeting acknowledgement of the drama unfolding, a shared understanding of Frederick's profound wisdom. "To my son, Trevor Michael Caldwell, I leave the following items from my personal workshop: 1 socket wrench set, 1 cordless drill, and my collection of automotive manuals. These are the tools I used when I started my first business, working 16-hour days so that my family would never struggle the way I had struggled." The words hung in the air like smoke, heavy with implication, a silent, damning indictment of Trevor's life of entitlement. Trevor's mouth opened and closed, opened and closed. No sound came out. His face was a mask of utter stupefaction, then a slow, building rage. "Additionally," Mr. Castellanos continued, his voice never wavering, his composure absolute, "I leave to Trevor the sum of $1, a single dollar, to be paid in cash immediately following this reading." "This is insane!" Trevor shot to his feet, his chair scraping loudly across the polished floor, a harsh sound in the shocked silence. "He can't do this. There are laws." "Please sit down, Mr. Caldwell." Mr. Castellanos' voice remained perfectly calm, utterly unruffled by the outburst, a solid rock against a breaking wave. "There's more." Trevor sat, but his hands gripped the armrest so hard his knuckles turned white, bone white against his reddened skin. Sienna's face had drained of all color, a pallid mask. Her phone, forgotten, slipped from her lap and clattered to the floor, a brittle sound. Neither of them moved to pick it up, their entire world having just imploded. "Frederick wanted me to read the following statement in his own words," Mr. Castellanos said, his voice now imbued with a solemn gravity. He picked up a separate sheet of paper, carefully unfolded it, and began to read, Frederick's voice, clear and unsparing, echoing through the room, mediated by the lawyer's precise delivery. "Trevor, if you're hearing this, I'm dead. And if I know you, which I do, you've spent the days since my funeral calculating my assets, planning how to spend money you assumed would be yours, treating your mother like an obstacle to be managed rather than a person to be comforted, a human being to be cherished. I hoped I was wrong. I hoped you proved me wrong, that some flicker of genuine human connection would ignite within you in my absence. But I don't think you did. Let me remind you of some numbers, some real numbers, not the fantastical figures you've been calculating in your head. $73,000. That's what I spent on your college education, the foundation for a future you squandered. $42,000, your fraternity fees over 4 years, paying for superficial connections and fleeting pleasures. $18,000, your summer in Italy, a cultural experience you treated as a mere backdrop for self-indulgence. $35,000, your wedding gift, a substantial sum meant to launch a new life, not simply to be absorbed into your relentless pursuit of more. These aren't rough estimates, Trevor. I kept meticulous records. Every penny I gave you, I wrote down, a ledger of my hopes, a register of my folly. I wanted to remember. I wanted to be able to look back and feel good about providing for my son, about building a legacy of support and opportunity. Instead, I look back and see the biggest mistake I ever made. I gave you everything, poured my life's work, my love, my strategic vision into you, and somehow raised someone I don't even recognize, someone who measures love in dollars, someone who called me selfish for not investing in a scheme that would have bankrupted us, a scheme that would have jeopardized your mother's security, the very thing I worked my entire life to ensure. Someone who visited his dying father exactly once in 6 months, and then only because his wife dragged him along when she needed to see if I'd updated my will. Yes, Trevor, I knew about that visit. I wasn't as senile as you thought. I heard you in the hallway, your whispered questions to your mother about my mental state, assessing my cognitive faculties like an asset to be valued or devalued. I heard Sienna asking if I'd made any changes lately, her voice dripping with feigned concern, masking a ravenous curiosity. I heard everything. Every word, every calculated insincerity. So, here's what you get. Tools. The same tools I used to build everything from nothing, with my own hands, my own sweat, my own ingenuity. The same tools that were good enough for me, that represented the dignity of honest labor, but were never good enough for you, who always demanded more, deserved less. $1. Exactly what your love and loyalty were worth to me in the end. A single coin reflecting the emptiness of your heart. And before you even think about contesting this will, before Sienna's father starts making threatening phone calls, before you unleash your lawyers and your calculated legal maneuvers, know this. I have documentation, recordings, evidence of every conversation, every calculation, every cruel dismissal, every mercenary exchange. I have the voicemail you left when I was in the hospital, recovering from an almost fatal incident, barely clinging to life. The one where you asked your mother to handle the estate paperwork while I was sedated, my consciousness blurred by medication. I have the text messages between you and Sienna, planning your investment strategies before I was even cold, before my body had even begun its return to the earth. Any attempt to contest this will, any legal action whatsoever, will result in the immediate public release of all this evidence, a meticulously compiled dossier of your depravity. Every news outlet, every social media platform, everyone you know, everyone you work for, everyone in Sienna's father's exclusive business circle, they'll all see exactly who you are. Your carefully constructed facade, your veneer of respectability, will be stripped bare for the world to witness. You wanted my money. You wanted my life's work handed to you like an inheritance you'd earned through birthright alone, a dividend on my suffering. Too bad. You got exactly what you deserved, $1, and the knowledge that your mother, the woman you've treated like an inconvenience for years, is now a very wealthy woman who never has to answer your calls again. Think about that every time you look at your children. Think about what kind of father leaves his kids nothing but a name tarnished by his own greed because he was too avaricious, too self-absorbed to love his own father properly. What kind of legacy does that leave them? What kind of example does that set for them? What kind of future can be built on such a barren foundation? That's your legacy now, Trevor. Not my money, but your choices. Your choices alone. The silence that followed was absolute, total, like the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving a vacuum. Trevor's face had gone from red to white to a sickly gray. He looked like he might be sick, on the verge of collapsing under the weight of his father's final, devastating words. Sienna stared at the floor, her designer handbag clutched in her lap, her perfect composure completely shattered, her world in shards. This is... Trevor's voice came out, a guttural sound, barely comprehensible. He was sick. He wasn't thinking clearly. We'll contest it. We'll fight this. His voice held a desperate, animalistic defiance, a man cornered. I wouldn't recommend that, Mr. Caldwell. Mr. Castellanos pulled out a second envelope, this one thick and heavy, brimming with undeniable truth, an arsenal of evidence. This contains exactly what Frederick mentioned, time-stamped recordings of phone conversations, detailed text message transcripts, photographs, video footage from the funeral, including audio of Mrs. Parker discussing account access approximately 40 minutes after Frederick's burial. Sienna made a small sound, almost a whimper, a raw sound of terror. Her carefully constructed world, built on deceit and avarice, was not merely cracking, it was shattering around her. There's also documentation of 3 separate occasions where Mr. Caldwell attempted to visit Frederick in the hospital and was turned away by staff at your specific request, Mrs. Parker. Mr. Castellanos' voice was devoid of judgment, merely stating facts, but the implications were devastating. Frederick had known. He had documented everything, every slight, every calculated cruelty, every betrayal. Not out of malice, but out of a profound need for justice, for truth, for my protection. And as he stated, Mr. Castellanos reiterated, his voice a steady, unyielding force, any legal challenge to this will result in immediate public disclosure. Trevor stood again, swaying slightly, his hands reaching out, not for comfort, but for manipulation. Mom, you can't let this happen. You know, Dad wasn't himself at the end. We can fix this. We can... I stood too, slowly, deliberately. Every eye in the room turned to me, a silent, expectant audience. For 53 years, I'd been quiet, supportive, dutiful, the constant, unwavering presence. I'd made countless excuses for Trevor's behavior, smoothed over his rough edges, softened Frederick's justifiable criticisms. I'd been the bridge between them, trying desperately to hold together a family that had already fallen apart, long before Frederick's physical departure. Not anymore. Your father, I said, my voice steady, cold, resonating with a newfound authority, was the most clear-headed man I've ever known. Even at the end, especially at the end, he saw you exactly as you are, and he gave you exactly what you earned, no more, no less. A perfectly just recompense for a lifetime of calculated indifference. Mom, don't, he began, his voice laced with a desperate plea. Don't, I interrupted, my voice sharp, final, cutting through his words like a blade. Don't call me that anymore. Mothers are for sons who love them, who show up, who care, who understand the weight of that sacred bond. You're not my son. You stopped being my son the day you asked when you could access your father's accounts, before he was even in the ground, before his soul had even left this earth. Trevor's mouth opened, closed, opened again. No words came out, only a choked silence, the ultimate surrender. I turned to Mr. Castellanos, my gaze firm. Is there anything else I need to sign? Just a few final documents, he replied, his voice gentle now, respectful. The house transfer, the investment portfolio, the trust management agreements for Delilah and Mason. Let's do it now, I said, my resolve unshakable. I sat back down. Mr. Castellanos slid papers across his desk, neat stacks of legal formality. I read each one carefully, methodically. Frederick had taught me that. Never sign anything without reading it, understanding every clause, every implication. It was a lesson in sovereignty, in guarding one's own interests. I added my signature in all the right places, my hand firm, decisive. Behind me, I heard Trevor and Sienna whispering urgently, their voices low, frantic, planning their next move, futile as it would be. I didn't turn around, didn't care what they were saying. Their schemes and calculations were now meaningless. They could plot and scheme and calculate all they wanted. It wouldn't change anything. The strategic chess game had already been played, and Frederick had won, not with brute force, but with quiet, devastating intellect. When the last signature was done, a small smile touched Mr. Castellanos' lips. He reached into his desk drawer and pulled out a single dollar bill, crisp and new. He slid it across the polished wood desk to Trevor, a final, symbolic gesture. Your inheritance, mister. Caldwell, as specified by your father's will. Trevor stared at it. The bill sat there on the polished wood, crisp and new, worth exactly nothing compared to what he'd expected, what he'd spent days, probably years, planning to spend, planning to leverage. He didn't pick it up. He just stared, as if the dollar itself were a venomous snake. Take it, I said, standing and gathering my purse, my voice soft but firm, unyielding. It's yours, legally. Frederick made sure of it. I walked toward the door. Mr. Castellanos opened it for me, a silent gesture of respect, a recognition of the journey I had just completed. As I stepped through, I heard Sienna's voice, high and desperate, a final, desperate plea. Miriam, please think about Delilah and Mason. Think about family. I paused, turned back, and looked at them both, sitting there in their expensive clothes with their empty hands and emptier souls. Their desperation was a mirror of their internal void. I'm thinking about Delilah and Mason, I said, my voice clear, carrying the weight of truth. That's why their grandfather made sure you can't touch their money. That's why they'll get a real education, real opportunities you can't leverage or gamble away, opportunities free from your corrupting influence. He protected them from you. The only family member who needed protecting from was you. I walked out, the words hanging in the air, a final, definitive sentence. Mr. Castellanos closed the door behind me with a soft, conclusive click, sealing the past, opening the future. The morning air felt cool on my face, clean, like a fresh canvas. I stood on the sidewalk outside the office and breathed it in, deep and full, like I'd been holding my breath for years, for decades, and had finally remembered how to exhale, how to live. My phone buzzed. I pulled it out, expecting another desperate, accusatory message from Trevor. Instead, it was a text from Mr. Castellanos. Simple, profound. Frederick would be proud of you. I smiled, actually smiled. The first real, genuine smile since Frederick died. A slow unfolding of joy and peace. It felt like the sun breaking through clouds, a new beginning. I drove home slowly, deliberately, taking the long way, past the park where Frederick and I used to walk on Sunday mornings, planning our week, our future. Past the diner where we'd had our first date 54 years ago, two young souls full of dreams, full of innocent hope. Past the auto shop where he'd started with nothing but those tools, the very tools he'd left to Trevor, and a relentless dream. Our house looked different now, not empty, not hollow, just mine. Completely mine, a sanctuary, a testament to enduring love and strategic wisdom. I made myself lunch, egg salad on wheat bread, the way Frederick liked it, a small act of remembrance, a personal communion. I ate at the kitchen table and thought about the future, about charities I could support, about scholarships I could fund in Frederick's name, ensuring his legacy of integrity and genuine opportunity lived on, about Delilah and Mason growing up, knowing their grandfather loved them enough to protect them from their own parents' avarice. About Trevor sitting in Mr. Castellanos' office, staring at a single dollar bill, and finally, truly understanding what he'd lost. Not money, That was never what mattered, not the ultimate currency. He'd lost something far more valuable, something Frederick had tried to give him his entire life. Something you can't inherit or invest in or calculate in spreadsheets. He'd lost love, real love, the kind that shows up, that sacrifices, that stays even when there's nothing to gain. And he'd lost it because he'd never valued it in the first place, never understood its true, immeasurable worth. I finished my sandwich, and with a new lightness, washed the dishes, including Frederick's coffee mug that had been sitting in the sink for a week. I dried it carefully, reverently, and put it back in the cabinet where it belonged, no longer a ghost, but a cherished memory. Then I went to Frederick's study, sat in his chair, the leather still warm from his ghost, and opened my laptop. I had work to do, foundations to research, lawyers to meet with, a life to build with the magnificent gift Frederick had given me. Not just money, but freedom. Permission to stop being the bridge between him and Trevor, a bridge that had been crumbling for years under the weight of his son's indifference. Permission to stop making excuses, stop hoping, stop sacrificing myself on the altar of a maternal love that had never been returned, never truly appreciated. Permission to finally, after 71 years, choose myself, choose my peace. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in fiery hues. The same sun that had set on every day of my marriage. The same sun that would rise tomorrow on a different life. A life where I was no longer trapped by obligation or guilt or the desperate hope that maybe, just maybe, Trevor would wake up one day and remember how to be human. Frederick had freed me, and in doing so, he'd given me something more valuable than $48 million. He'd given me peace, a hard-won, deeply earned peace.